All right. Greetings and welcome. I am Terry Roberts Leonard, and I have the honor to serve as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Carmel Place Schools. I'm so thankful that you have taken some time out of your day to join us for our Courageous Conversation series. The Courageous Conversation series aims to inspire dialogue, community engagement, and civic education. Speakers will include scholars, community leaders, and diversity professionals whose scholarship, leadership, and advocacy enhance the school system's efforts to present diverse viewpoints, ideas, and perspectives to inspire greater understanding and appreciation for inclusive excellence. I am honored to be here today engaging in this important topic with our guest facilitator, Dr. Ebony Griggs-Griffin. Dr. Ebony Griggs-Griffin has over 15 years of experience with training and development in the areas of diversity, inclusion, bias, and leadership development. She has served as a consultant and facilitator of knowledge development with local, regional, and national organizations. As a change agent, she is dedicated to working in partnership with clients to provide results that are impactful and meaningful. If you have questions during the event, feel free to utilize the Q&A feature as well as the chat feature on Zoom, and she will get to as many questions as she can within our allotted time frame. I will help keep an eye on that chat for you, Dr. Griggs-Griffin, and now I will turn it over to her. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry. I appreciate you, and I appreciate Carmel Place Schools for inviting me to join you all this evening or early evening. I am excited to be in your presence today. And I have to say, Women's History Month is the month that I get, one of the months that I get the most excited about. It is truly a month that I revel in the history of women, how far we have come, but also how far we have to go. And that's what our talk will be about today. And so we're going to get started. I'm going to share my screen and get the presentation going. Okay, as many times as I have done this, I still have to get used to. I spent so many years standing in front of individuals and talking and seeing faces. I still have to get used to webinars and this, where you don't see the faces, but you only can engage through the chat. So bear with me as I continue to get used to this, even after 2 years that we've been in such a situation. So our talk today is about the history, evolution, and resilience of women in Women's History Month. And I want to be clear, Terry said a lot of things about me and all those wonderful things, but I want to be clear that I am not a historian. I am not a historian as it comes to women in women's history, but I am her. I am a part of the history, I am a part of the evolution, and I am part of the resilience of what being a woman. And so are my ancestors, and so is my daughter, and so is the women that will come behind me. And so I speak from that lens and from that seat today. And I speak from the seats of actually going to school and learning some of this, but really from the seats of being her is where I speak from today. We will discuss the history of Women's History Month. We'll do a little bit of discussion of that. We'll discuss the evolution of the women's plight to be where they are today. And we'll discuss the resilience of women and also how do we move forward? We'll do some, what do we stop doing? What do we continue to do? And what do we start doing? And so I am going to ask you a question. And my question to you, and it is my hope, and this is what I don't know, is that I can see the chat. And that I'm not sure about in this venue, but what does Women's History Month mean to you? And why is it important to you? So I'll give you a second to share some of that. So what is, Terry, I want to let you know, I cannot see the chat. So I don't know if you can tell me a couple of things or not.
Sorry, I was muted. A time, a time to celebrate women, a time to learn accomplishments, learning about people I don't know a lot about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So you're right? What does Women's History Month mean? It truly is about a celebration of the history, a celebration of women, a celebration of what they've been through, what we've been through, and where we are today, and where we want to go, right? And then why is it important? And here's a couple of quotes that I think speaks to why history is important in general, right? A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. And so a tree without roots cannot stand. It cannot stand. The roots is what keeps the tree grounded. And so what often keeps us grounded as individuals and as a society is the history that we have, our culture, our past history, the origin in which we stand on. And some of it is positive and a lot of it is not. Especially when it comes to what we're going to speak about today is women's rights. But the history matters. Our history matters. What are we celebrating if we're not looking at the history? There's a quote, a generation which ignores history has no past and has no future. So how do we know where to go if we don't know where we've been? Right? So history is essential. It's essential to look at. And a small body of determined spirit inspired by an unquenchable faith in their mission can alter the course of history. So if we know what we've been through, what has happened, and where do we want to go, right? That unquenchable faith in our mission to do better, to be better, to move forward. Well, what are we moving forward from if we don't know where we've been, right? And so that is an important part, and that's why history is so important. And to me, when I see this picture, the fight for women's rights, and I see this individual holding a child that, because I cannot see their faces and I'm making an assumption that both look like females potentially, then it tells me this picture sort of depicts for me even what it depicts for myself. And why history is important to me. There were so many that came before me. For me to even have doctor in front of my name, when I look at the history and the fight that women have been through, in order to make it to the point that I can even have gone to school to obtain my bachelor's, to obtain my master's, and then to obtain my doctorate degree. And then to know that my daughter, who is now soon to be 17 years old, is watching all of that. She's paying attention to all of that. She is paying attention, just like this child is paying attention and holding the sign that says fight for women's rights. And while that child may not completely understand what is going on and what they're fighting for in that moment, they're a part of it. They're seeing it, even at a young age, to understand, to put that into them, to say it is important to fight for the rights of everyone, to be mindful and think about the human rights, the right to just be who we are and who we want to be and have equality, to have equity. Because equality is one thing, but equity is often what we are fighting for today. And so that is important to me. History is important to me because I've made history as the first to be doctor and be called doctor in my family. I am the first female or male that we are aware of. And my daughter is watching that. She is seeing that this history has been made in our family and what can continue to happen. And so that's why this history is so important to me. You are right, it's important to celebrate where we have come from and where we're going. So just some interesting facts, and I'm actually not going to read this because what we're going to watch is they're going to talk exactly about this. But when you hear about the history of women and women's rights to vote. And what they went through, I mean, just what they went through to have the right to vote and how it was ratified in 1920. One of the things I want to point out is while women were given the right to vote in 1920, it wasn't until 1965 when the Voting Rights Act made it voting a reality for Black women. And so while women were fighting to vote, there was still a group of women who were not able to even participate in that until 1965. So I am going to show a small clip that will speak to exactly what I'm saying.
Now, kicking off Women's History Month on this March 1st, and we want to turn now to Nightline Philly for Judy Jang to give us a little history lesson on how it all grew into the celebration we now know today. It's March 1st, marks the beginning of Women's History Month, a month-long celebration to honor women's often overlooked contributions to American history, like those of Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman to officially become a doctor in the United States in 1849. Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, all leaders in the women's suffrage movement. And Harriet Tubman, who led hundreds of enslaved people to freedom. But what's the history behind Women's History Month? It all began in 1978 with only a week-long celebration. It was organized by the Sonoma County Commission on Women. The week of March 8th was selected to correspond with International Women's Day. It's been celebrated around the world on March 8th since 1911. The movement began to gain momentum, and the following year, other communities and school districts initiated their own celebrations of Women's History Week. Then in 1980, the National Women's History Project lobbied for national recognition, and they were heard, because in February of that year, President Jimmy Carter issued the first proclamation, which declared the week of March 8th as National Women's History Week. 6 years later, the same organization issued for an expansion on the event. And in March of 1987, Congress passed Public Law 100-9, proclaiming March as Women's History Month. Now, every March and all month long, we celebrate countless extraordinary women who've earned their place at the table. And the rest, as they say, is history.
And so that's a brief history of Women's History Month. It started off as a week, which is very similar to what you hear about Black History Month. And what women could have said is, thank you so much. You gave us a week and we are so happy. But they did not. They continued with their resiliency. They continued to fight to say, no, we deserve more than a week to recognize something so powerful, so important, and so impactful. We would like a month. And that is how we got to Women's History Month. This year, and every year, there's a new theme as it pertains to National Women's History. So National Women's History Alliance designates a yearly theme for Women's History Month. The 2020 theme is Women Providing Healing, Promoting Hope. And it makes complete sense in the sense of them really doing a tribute to the hours and the work that was put in by women, the ceaseless work, as they say, for caregivers and the frontline workers during this ongoing pandemic. And what we know is that when we were looking at childcare, when you look at who are the most represented in the education system, especially when it comes to elementary education and middle school education, it is women who are on the front lines, who have been on the front lines, who are taking care of children, who are the nurses who's been coming in and working tirelessly. So women providing healing and promoting hope is this year's theme. And I'm not sure that we even really publicize that much of each year there's a theme, but each year it is, and this is this year's theme. I think that this quote spoke to this. History has demonstrated that the most notable winners usually encountered heartbreaking obstacles before they triumphed. They won because they refused to become discouraged by their defeats. Again, we could have given up and said they just won't give us the right to vote. Men will just be the only ones that have the right to vote. And they did not. They continued to fight for the right just to vote, just to be able to cast a vote. And when I look at where things are even today, and some of the things that we continue to fight for, voting rights continues to be a part of the conversation, even today in 2022. So we still have some work to be done. It had long come to my attention that people of accomplishment rarely sat back and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things. That's what this is about. This is why we celebrate women's history, because women did not sit back, and they do not sit back and just wait for accomplishments to come. Absolutely not. They have to make them happen, such as the women that we're going to talk about. So when we just talked a little bit about the history of Women's History Month, but I want to talk a little bit about, because remember, we're talking about her, the history, the evolution, and the resilience of women. And so that's the history that we spoke about. And the history is so much more than that. So much more than that. But that's what we have time to speak about today. And I would encourage you, as I said, I heard some people, Terry, indicate people who were saying to learn about someone I didn't know about, to learn that you take the opportunity that you take up this month, and not just March, but continue to educate yourself on individuals who made such an impact to our society and where we are today. Here are a couple of women. When I think about the evolution, I'm going to go through a couple of women that I thought would stand out for us in this conversation today. And if you may not have heard about, and some I know for a fact you have definitely heard about. Virginia Truth, as many of us has heard about, was an American abolitionist. She and a women's rights activist. And she is most known for her speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" And later on, when I give some suggestions of the books for us to read, one of the books is Bell Hooks, who passed not too long ago, who wrote the book, "Ain't I a Woman?" It's such a powerful book that speaks to the history of women and its plight and where we've come from and the resiliency of women. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was an abolitionist who helped launch the American women's rights movement. She co-wrote the Declaration of Sentiments and a sharp critique of gender inequality in the US in 1848. And then Victoria Woodhull was an American leader of women's suffrage movement and the first female candidate for president of the United States in the 1872 election. And when we hear about what's going on right now as it pertains to politics, which we will get to, we have to pay and celebrate the women who came before us, who was the first candidate for president of the United States in 1872. We go on to look at Amelia Earhart in 1928, who was the first female pilot to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. She was also the 16th woman to be issued pilot's license. And I'm sure that when I think about women that I've heard about all of my life, she is one of the women that I have heard about. Shirley Chisholm is in 1968 made history when she became the first Black woman to be elected into Congress. And there's actually a story, a movie coming out that pertains to her and her plight and the work that she did that Regina King is working on, and she's actually working on it here in Cincinnati. Sandra Day O'Connor became the first woman appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. She was nominated by President Reagan, and the Senate vote to appoint her was unanimous. She was a key swing vote in upholding the big case like Roe v. Wade. So the next we're going to speak about as we talk about the evolution of women is Tammy Duckworth. She became the first Thai American woman and the first female amputee to be elected to Congress. Just 1 year into her term, she fought for the resolution allowing infants into the chamber room, ensuring that new parents in the Senate wouldn't have to miss out on any votes because of their newborns. And that just happened. That's not something that happened a really long time ago. It really speaks to the things that we are still fighting for as it pertains to women and women's rights, and to even think about women as caregivers and as mothers, to be able to actually even have my child close so that I can participate in voting is something that's essential to my role. And Kamala Harris, on January 20th, 2021, she became the first woman and the first African-American and South Asian person to become the Vice President of the United States. Now, this isn't new to her as far as the first in breaking glass ceilings, as it indicates here. After her successful bid for California Attorney General, she once again became the first woman and person of color to hold the position. And while we can sit here and we can talk about all of the wonderful things that has occurred with women in our time and the evolution of women and the things that we have come. So no, we are not fighting to, and we're not holding our pitch signs right now to say we need to be able to vote. We are still holding pitch signs in some ways around voting for some individuals, but not for women to actually be able to go and vote. But we continue to have things that we have to fight for. There is still work to be done. I see that there was someone said, it is important to spread the word of the work women have done and continue to do. I completely agree. Thank you. So there is still work to be done. And I want to speak to a couple of things that we are still fighting for today. I think sometimes I've heard people say so often, but look how far we've come. I mean, look, that women can hold positions, they can hold CEO positions, they're at board tables, they're in the White House as first ladies, they're in the White House as VPs, they're in the White House on the Senate and Congress, et cetera. So shouldn't you just be satisfied with where we've come and how far we've come today? And what I often say is, yes, we have come very far, but we still have some ways to go. So I'm going to just bring to our attention some things that we are continuing to fight for today as it pertains to women and women's rights and the things that they have to still fight for and deal with today. Some of the gender gaps, the gaps that we're experiencing when it pertains to women, one of them is still sex discrimination in employment. Workplace sexual harassment and assault is still common, and it has even driven women in masses to resign from their positions. Reporting such abuse has been concerning for women, as has been from a long time ago. It continues to be today. It's not attractive for women because of the fear of retaliation and the lack of consequences for the abuser. This continues to be something that we are fighting for today and fighting against, should I indicate, fighting against someone sexually harassing us in the workplace. And we're still fighting it and fighting against it today. And women are resigning, as it is indicating, from positions because they feel like they have no other choice but to do so. You still have organizations who does not have sex discrimination in their policies. And even if they do, they're not being upheld. And again, the fear of retaliation for women to even report it. Occupational segregation by gender. According to the Oregon State University's Journal of Management, implicit bias, and implicit bias speaking to the unconscious bias, the thing that comes up for us automatically when we meet people, when we interact with people based on things that we're not even paying attention to. So we're not speaking of explicit bias, we're speaking of implicit bias, something that is unconscious, often results in women's resumes being passed over in favor of men's during consideration for executive positions. I have a daughter, and when we were naming my daughter, I think I spoke to this when I was with Carmel Clay Schools before. When we were deciding on what to name my daughter, one of the things that was important to me and that I really needed to think about, unfortunately, is if someone heard her name or saw her name, would they be able to know that she was a female? And so we tried to name her a name that they may not know. Her name is Kendall. And that was done purposefully due to things like this, that just someone's unconscious bias, they may not even be aware. And allow me to be clear, there are people with explicit bias that are knowingly making the decision, but then sometimes it's our unconscious bias, implicit bias that would have us look over a resume and say, no, not for this position. A female would not be able to do this. Or when you think about women who go to interviews and hide their pregnancy because they're afraid that they won't be hired just because they're pregnant, because they may be viewed by someone's implicit or explicit bias as not having the ability to do the job because they are a mother or going to be a mother. These are the things that we are still having conversations about and that we are still fighting against. At Fortune 500 companies, women currently account for just 7.4% of CEOs. 7.4% of CEOs. That is not small. And we are still fighting to what people say the glass ceiling, that there's still this glass ceiling there that won't allow women but to get to one point. You can be an administrative assistant, you can be an executive assistant, right? You can be a manager, but the ability to run an organization and run, absolutely not. Women are just not equipped or prepared to do so. We are still fighting against that. And we know that when it's only 7.4% of women as CEOs. The pay gap. Although the pay gap is narrowing, women in the US that are working full-time and part-time make 79% of what their male counterparts earn. And as I sit and I think about this, I continue to just be appalled that we are still having this conversation, that this is even still a conversation at all. It's just appalling. And what we look at is women who are obtaining education, they have the credentials, and yet we continue to not pay women equitable pay. Equitable pay. We are still having this conversation and fighting for this today. Underrepresentation in the government. We are still talking about first in 2022. The first woman in 2022, even in government, although women make up nearly 51% of the US population, only 27% of Congress is comprised of women. We are still talking about Kamala Harris, who's the first woman of color, right? We were still talking about Hillary Clinton and how important and impactful her running for the race of president was, that she could get the nomination. That was impactful. And we were still talking about that as a first. Even today, the underrepresentation in our government is prevalent. And far too many girls especially those from the poorest families, still face gender discrimination in education, child marriage and pregnancy, sexual violence, and unrecognized domestic work still today. I am going to show a video that speaks to a little bit of what I just stated.
Women and girls are leaders, change makers, caretakers, and peacekeepers.
Ebony, the volume is not coming through very clear.
Women and girls are still forced to fight for their rights. How much progress is made and how much work remains? How can you?
It sounded like it was muffled.
I'm not sure why it's doing that. I'll try one more time, and if it doesn't, then we won't show the video. I don't want it to do that. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Women and girls are leaders, change makers, caretakers, and peacekeepers. How much women and girls are still forced
Yeah, it's doing the same thing.
Okay. Well, what we won't do is show that because I don't want that to continue to occur. And it was a short video, it wasn't a very long video, but the video just spoke to the things that we are still fighting, and the things that I just discussed. It was just reiterating. So we've talked a little bit about, let me continue to share my screen. So we've talked about some of the gaps and the ways that we continue to fight. But in order for us to even be where we are today, that took resilience. With all of that, we yet continue to rise. So we've talked a bit about the history. We've talked a little bit about the gaps and the what we are going through even today, right? The evolution and where we are going, where we've been, where we're going, how things are going. But let's talk a little bit about resilience. When you think about resilience, the definition of resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness, and the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, elasticity. That's the definition of resilience. And Terry, I'm going to ask for your assistance again. How have you witnessed resilience in women? And I'll give you a moment to respond to that. How have you witnessed resiliency in women? Even if that's you yourself, how have you been resilient? Please share.
While we're waiting on people to write in the chat, I can share one. I have witnessed resiliency in women in when it comes to the workplace and not having their ideas heard and still having to, come back day after day and really trying to figure out the best way to kind of get the message through. Sometimes that comes in the form of trying to quote unquote sell your idea or, approaching it in a different way. Or even I've even witnessed women who have gone to male coworkers and said, hey, present this for me, and just claim it's yours so that it would be, because they knew it would be, taken in a different way. So
Wow.
That is something that I have definitely witnessed in the past.
Wow, Terry, and I've witnessed some of those same exact things. even today. I've witnessed women spoken over, and yet they continue to try. They continue to speak. Or like you said, ask someone else to speak. I've witnessed women just be completely disrespected, and yet they remain at the table. I've witnessed women not be invited to the table, and as we've heard, well, then you bring your own chair and come to the table anyway. I've witnessed that. I've witnessed resiliency in my mother, who was a single mother. We grew up not having it all, but for her to watch her go from being a single mom to then obtaining her bachelor's and her master's degree is just her resiliency with 4 children, and my grandmother's resiliency with 10 children and no car and going to work every day. And I witnessed it even within my family, the amazing resiliency of women.
There can also be a focus on, or a hyper focus on, appearance. And so that being brought to the table, be it hair, body shape, size, anything like that, as opposed to, and especially with attire, even through not just individuals, but through specific codes and dress codes and rules and things like that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I often say when I do trainings as it pertains to generational culture, who made the determination of what professionalism was? Who wrote the book? Who wrote the handbook? Who wrote the policies indicating of what professionalism looked like? I mean, I remember seeing women in suits with the shoulder pads, and you had to wear the black suit and a blue suit and a brown suit and pantsuit in order to be viewed and said to be equipped to be professional and at the table with men. And while some of that has changed, it continues today. It continues to be today. Sizeism is real in the workplace, especially when it comes to women. Especially when it comes to women. And if you are looked over because of your size or not being viewed as capable because of size, all of that continues to occur in the workplace. Terry, was there anything else? I just want to make sure before I move on.
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So when I think about resiliency, and Maya Angelou says, "Still I rise," I think about what we are witnessing right now in the confirmation of Ketanji Brown Jackson. You know, when we look at the evolution, when we look at the history, we look at the evolution and we look at resiliency, her. I think about where we are right now today as it pertains to Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. She would make history by becoming the first Black woman to serve on the court for the first time since the Supreme Court's founding in 1790. A Black woman will sit on the bench. Since 1790, we are now in 2020. The Black woman will sit on the bench if she is confirmed. But when you have sat and watched, and I don't know if many of you are witnessing what is occurring with this confirmation, watching the resiliency of this woman as she sits through some of the most interesting questioning, to say the least, of from individuals who don't have the credentials that she has, who are not as qualified as she has. And she continues to rise. She continues to continue on answering the questions, being professional, and just standing firm in who she knows she is and her capabilities as a woman. Just truly speaks to resiliency, in my opinion. Here's a couple of quotes as it pertains to resilience. And one thing Terry may know about me and others who knows me, I live by quotes. I think they are just extremely impactful. I keep them around me. I refer to them often. So here are a couple as it pertains to resilience. Women are like tea bags. You never know how strong they are until they are in hot water, right? oftentimes we as women don't know how strong we are until we have to be. We don't know how strong we are until we actually have to be that strong. The best protection any woman can have is her courage, is the courage to stand, the courage to continue, the courage to have resiliency, to be resilient, the courage to talk to someone and indicate that they are being diminishing, they're diminishing their abilities, their capabilities, their talents, that they are speaking to them in a disrespectful tone, that they would never speak to a male in that tone, that they are treating you differently because you are a woman. And the fact that we even have to question and ask, did he say that to me because I was a woman? Would he have said that? Or even would she have said? Because it isn't just men that we receive that from. We often sometimes receive it from women as well, who are partaking in some of this behavior. The strength of a woman is not measured by the impact that all her hardships in life have had on her, but the strength of a woman is measured by the extent of her refusal to allow her hardships to dictate her and who she becomes. Truly speaks to resiliency, truly speaks to not allowing our hardships and the things that we have gone through, because we continue to go through some things as women. But we refuse to allow those hardships and those things that we are enduring to dictate who we are and who we will become. If we did, we would not still have some of the first, even today. And each time a woman stands up for herself, she stands up for all women. I am her. You are her. We are her. We are history. We are evolution of women, and we are truly resilient as women. We are her. And each time that we are invited to the table, each time I often say lift as we should lift as we climb. We should not get to the top or get to a place and just be there ourselves, but also to lift others as we continue to climb. Because each time that we're at a table, that allows the opportunity for someone else to be at the table. When if she is confirmed, it allows for them to now say it's no longer a first. There's someone else who can believe that because she's in that seat, that she can do it as well. This is why it's so impactful for us to celebrate women and the history of women and the plight of women and how far we've come, because we are being watched. And we have to understand that each time that we stand up and we fight, we're not doing that just for ourselves. We're doing that for those that will come behind us. That's resiliency. But I also want to say one last thing about resiliency before I go on. And that is the quote I just read today that someone wrote. Just because I am strong enough to handle the pain doesn't mean I deserve it. And sometimes we believe that because women are so strong, oh, they'll be fine. They've done it. They're resilient. We do it to children as well. Oh, they'll be fine. They're resilient. Well, there's trauma that is left behind. There's things that we still endure that are painful. And just because we can endure it, and just because we're strong enough, and just because we're strong like a tea bag in hot water, doesn't mean that we deserve that pain. It doesn't mean we deserve inequality. It doesn't mean we don't deserve to be at the table. It doesn't mean we haven't earned our place. And because I am a woman, you are making a decision to indicate you don't believe I am capable by me being a woman alone. So just because we're strong enough to handle it doesn't mean we deserve it. And please remember that. So I am now going to speak to a couple of things. The time is winding. It's amazing how quickly time goes, that we can do as we move forward, right? So we've talked about history, we've talked about evolution, we've talked about our resiliency as women. But let's talk a little bit about what we can start, stop, and continue. What I would say, these are a couple of things that we need to stop. The first one is telling young ladies and women that showing emotion is a weakness, that showing an ethic of care is a weakness. I remember I put on a wise women breakfast. I was working at a college and the president of the college was a female. And she was speaking to the young women of the college. And she said, showing emotion is not a weakness, it's a strength. And that was the first time I heard a woman say that. And anyone who knows me knows that my line name and my sorority is emotional, because I'm a pretty emotional being. My mother used to say that I cry for those who can't cry. She's like, you cry when you're happy, you're sad, you're angry. It's just truly who I am. But I've learned, because of something she said as the president that I heard in my seat, that I have now understood that my emotion and my care for others is not a weakness. It is a strength. And that we should be encouraging others, including men, that it is okay to show emotion, that it is okay to show care, and that it is okay, that it is a strength to do so, to show empathy for someone else, to care for someone else. We have got to stop telling women and young ladies anything other than that. We need to stop telling young ladies that women aren't to be trusted. We continue to put things in place with young women when we tell them that, when we are raising them to say, oh, you can't trust women. It is us, we are her. We need each other. I could not be where I am without the women who stood before me and came before me and that are in my life today. We need to stop putting all the ownership of the movement on women. It is not all on women to get us to where we need to be. We need to have men say that is discrimination. We need men to say that is not right, that is not equitable. We need these men who are in these CEO positions that women are not in to stand up and say, this is not correct. This is discrimination. We need to put policies in place. We need to make change. We need allies. It is not only on women. We need to stop comparing our youth to one another. It is harmful. Social media does it enough that they are looking at who's beautiful and comparing themselves to these people who aren't even real in some senses, of things that we are doing to our bodies to be more attractive, so that we can potentially move up in places or be seen as beautiful and capable. But comparing our youth to one another is harmful. We need to stop putting limitations on our young ladies and telling them they can't do something when they are capable of doing any and everything. Even our youth who may have be on the spectrum or may have some learning challenges, they need to know that they are capable. They are beyond capable. They need to know this, and we need to stop putting limitations on them. And as women, we need to stop putting limitations on ourselves. We are more than capable. We can do it. We've proven in so many sectors, as you look at the history of women, that we are so capable. So stop putting limitations on you as a woman as well. Well, we should continue having courageous conversations that speaks to women's rights and inequalities. We continue to have people like Terry make sure that we continue to have these conversations that aren't always the most comfortable. Sometimes they are, the reason they're courageous conversations is because it isn't comfortable all the time. That we need to talk about the work that has to be done. We need to continue to provide opportunities for women to see great examples of what they can do, of who they can be, to aspire to. We need to praise our young ladies. They are truly amazing. It should be a daily thing of saying you are beautiful, you are capable, you are intelligent, you are amazing, you can do it. We have to continue to plant it and say it to them over and over and over and over again, because the world will continue to tell them different. We need to continue to provide an education that speaks to the history of the plight and to the possibilities of our future. And then we need to continue celebrating how far we have come without forgetting how far we have to go. And then as far as what we need to start, let's start showing examples of women in various fields, especially in the school system, making sure that we're not showing even just the same women over and over again. There's so many women that have done things in our society, in our world. And yes, it may take for you to look a little bit harder and study a little bit more. And the same we need to do as parents to make sure that our youth understand the examples and see the examples of women in various fields, that they understand that they can be any and everything that they want to be, but they have to know that it's possible. This is why representation is essential. Start knowing when to remove your cape. As women, as we talked about this resiliency, but that's a weight of resiliency. It's a weight to be strong and to always feel like you have to have the superwoman cape on. We as women need to know when to remove our cape, when to say enough is enough, when to say, I am the helper, I am the provider, but I need to be provided for. I need support as well. So knowing when to remove our cape, it's okay to do so. Start becoming an example of positive women relationships, both in personal and professional, personally and professionally. We have to be examples to our youth of positive women relationships. We have to show our youth and show the women that are coming behind us in the workforce that women can work together, that women can sit at the table together, that we can be, that we are important and we can band together to get things done. We need to start being an ally. And I am speaking to men. Please understand that it is important for you to educate yourself, as I spoke to earlier, not always asking women to do it for you. Take some ownership in it. Educate others. Be careful and conscious of what you say around your young boys and your young females, the young girls that you are saying about women. They're paying attention. Being an ally also means finding ways to advocate. How can you go out and advocate for some of the things that I just listed that we are still fighting for? And don't ask me, go find out. And don't ask another woman. Go find out and let the woman know exactly what you're doing and how you are working with her and working alongside her to ensure that there's equity. Build up our youth. And then get yourself a resilience circle. I have a resilience circle. And that circle is of women, mostly women, and I have some males in my resilience circle who I can go to and be honest about what I'm dealing with, about the plights and what the weight of being a woman is in our society. And that circle listens and pays attention and offers me support and offers me resources. It's so important. And to help our youth create a resilient circle, because they are going to need it. This world isn't always kind to us, as you can see. So that's what I say we need to start, stop, and continue. How to celebrate. When we talk about women's history, here are some ways that we can celebrate. We discover female artists. We need to read female authors. We need to listen to female musicians. We need to support female businesses, and then learn and educate ourselves about women's history. And before I leave you today, I wanted to make sure I gave a couple of books, because this is a school district and I want school system that I thought that may be, and Terry can make sure that this is out there. So when we think about our young readers, here are a couple of books that I think I'm talking about even from young as far as elementary school age children into that 7th grade. is these are a couple of books for our young readers that they can read, that you can ensure that they have, that speaks to empowerment, that speaks to strength, that speaks to resiliency, that speaks to the plight, that speaks to the history, the rich history of women. And then also to the middle school and high school readers, here are a couple of books that I think will be impactful for them as far as it pertains to the same thing, the history, the resiliency, and empowerment that we need for our youth and women to have as they go into the workforce and go into college and prepare themselves for our diverse society. And then for us adult readers, here are a couple of books that I own, that I have, that I would say are good books as it pertains to the same for us adult readers as well. And that was the book I was speaking to, Ain't I a Woman, about Black women and feminism by Bell Hooks, the great Bell Hooks that is no longer with us. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. It should not. We are her. We are her." And that is my time with you, I believe. And I'm going to open it up, Terry. I'm not sure if we want to offer time for questions and answers, but I am